Build your own net zero lifestyle with Giki Zero. Our next session is Build your own net zero lifestyle with Giki Zero. Do you want to know why net zero really matters and what it actually looks like for you? Well, in this session with Johan, co-founder of Giki, find out how you can build your own personal path to net zero and use your voice to help others do the same.
Hi there. So my name's Jo, and thank you for that brilliant intro. I set up Giki with my husband James to help all of us across our country and also across the planet eventually to live in a way that is better for the environment. So I wanted to start by just sharing some slides with you, some pictures. So I'm just going to get the screen to share. And today, what I'm going to talk to you about is what we can do about climate change as people, and how we can get towards this idea of net zero. And I'm going to explain that. It sounds kind of complicated, but it's actually quite straightforward. So first, I thought it'd be really good to talk about what causes climate change. Now, you might want to have a little think about this while I show you some pictures. But the first thing, which if I just make this bigger, you'll be able to see it better. There we go. You can see these chimneys are pumping out a lot of smoke. Now, these chimneys are actually burning coal or gas, which are called fossil fuels, and you can actually dig them out of the ground. They've been there for millions and millions of years, created naturally, and humans have dug them out of the ground for the last 200 years or so, and we burn them to make electricity and to use to drive our cars and in all sorts of different ways. But when we burn them, they create the smoke, as you can see, and that creates climate change. So the smoke has a gas in it called carbon dioxide, which is one of the major causes of climate change. So burning coal and gas to make electricity is one of the main causes of climate change. Next, now this might look familiar to many of you going to school in traffic jams or being in school buses. Each time we drive in a car, we usually have to put petrol or diesel in it to make it work, and that is then burnt to make the car work. And the exhaust that comes out the back of the car, some of that has carbon dioxide emissions in it, which are also one of the causes of climate change. Aeroplanes, the same principle really as cars. We have to burn fuel to make them fly. They're pretty heavy. To get them off the ground and to keep them going requires a lot of fuel. And another thing that may be less commonly thought about is trees. So trees are amazing for many, many different reasons, but trees play this really important role in actually taking some of those carbon emissions back into the ground. So where we need oxygen to breathe and to exist, trees need carbon and carbon dioxide to grow. So they absorb it from the air, and then they get bigger and bigger and keep on absorbing more and more carbon dioxide, which is this gas that causes climate change. So one of the problems is that as humans, we've been cutting down a lot of trees, mainly to grow food for ourselves or to grow food for the animals that we eat. And that has had a really worrying effect in that there just aren't as many trees to bring all this carbon dioxide back into the earth. So that is another of the causes of climate change. So I thought now we've got a bit about what some of the causes are. I wanted to read to you a little story which you might be familiar with. Now, this is a picture that I took at the youth climate strikes. You might have heard about them. This was in London a couple of summers ago now. And I particularly like this poster because it reminded me of this great book that I'm going to read you a little bit of. So the guy who wrote the poster said, "I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. Can Killing the Planet, Please. Now, I don't know how many of you have come across this book. If you haven't read it, it's really good, whatever age you are. I started reading it to my kids when they were at reception, and we were reading it the other day, where they are now in years 3 and 4. But even I have to say, I really enjoy it as well. And it's basically about this creature called the Lorax, who's trying to protect nature. And there are these lovely trees called the Trifula trees, which you can probably see here. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of it because I do really enjoy it. I think you will too. Way back in the days when the grass was still green, and the pond was still wet, and the clouds were still clean, and the song of the Swansea swans rang out in space, one morning I came to this glorious place, and I first saw the trees, the Trifula trees, the bright-coloured tufts of the Trifula trees, mile after mile in the fresh morning breeze. And under the trees I saw brown barbaloots. These are the barbaloots, these very sweet animals, frisking about in their barbaloot suits as they played in the shade and ate Trifula fruits. And so he paints this lovely picture of how wonderful nature is with these Trifula trees. But then somebody comes along and discovers that he can do something with them. In no time at all, I had built a small shop. Then I chopped down a Trifula tree with one chop. And with great skillful skill and with great speedy speed, I took the soft tuft and I knitted a sneed. Now this is a sneed. I think it's a kind of onesie, I have to say. They don't look very nice. So the book then goes on and talks about how because they've discovered that these trees can make these sneeds that they want to make, that they just keep on and on and on cutting down the trees to make more and more of these sneeds. And this is where we get to after quite some time in the book. And you see there's one tree left. And at that very moment, we heard a loud whack. From outside in the fields came a sickening smack of an axe of a tree. Then we heard the tree fall, the very last Trifula tree of them all. And it's a really brilliant story that helps remind us what we have to protect, really. And we have this wonderful planet that we live on, and there's so many wonderful things about it to protect, and that is what I wanted to talk to you about today. So I'm going to stop sharing that. I should have stopped sharing that before, shouldn't I? Sorry about that. Hopefully you can see me now. So what I wanted to talk about was what we can do. And we think at Giki that the first most important thing that we can do in terms of looking at the effect that we have on the environment is to understand that effect. So everything that we do can have an impact on the environment. It can be a positive impact or a negative impact. So for example, if we drive our car, that will have an impact. And one of the areas that is really important to think about is how we get around. So, you know, there are lots and lots and lots of different ways to move around, and some of them are better for the planet than others. Other things that we might want to think about is our home. So, for example, we all generally have heating in our homes, or whether we have a home that has lots of cold air coming in through the windows because it's an old house and the windows are a bit shaky, or if it's a house that is nice and sealed and doesn't have lots of cold air coming in. There are lots of different things about our home that can make a real difference in terms of helping protect the environment, because we don't want to have to use lots and lots and lots of fossil fuels to burn to make our house warmer. Now, another thing which is really important is what we eat, and that's something that can have a different effect on the planet depending on what we eat. And then also what we buy. So, you know, anything from, you know, my stapler here to this toy cow that belongs to my children, to my mug of coffee. All of these things that we buy have to be made, and it's always good to think about whether we really need them. So those are some of the areas that we can think about in terms of how we might want to make little changes in our own lifestyle. So I thought I might start with our homes. Now, one thing that maybe sometimes your parents might ask you about is turning the lights off. So whenever we have the lights on, we need electricity to make the lights work. And if we leave lights on in rooms that we don't need them, then that's using electricity that we don't really need to use. So one really good thing to do is to start turning the lights off that we don't need. And that will all help mean that we use less electricity. And remember the picture of the chimneys that we looked at earlier? So they are, those chimneys are burning really all the time, making electricity for us to use. And if we can use a bit less of it, then they don't need to burn as much to make it. So that's a good one. Another really good one is if you have showers, or, well, I'm sure you do have showers or baths, not to make the bath too deep and not to make the shower too long. So if you have a bit of a shorter shower, it means you don't have to heat up as much water. So that means you don't have to burn as many fossil fuels to heat your water up. So that's another good one as well that everyone can try. And another one, which is probably really good one to think about, is actually encouraging your parents to use electricity that's made from wind rather than from burning fossil fuels. So there are more and more ways, and it's really easy to do now. It did used to be more expensive, but the good news is it actually costs the same. So if you decided that you wanted to encourage your mummy and daddy, or whoever you live with, to change to using wind electricity that's made by what are called renewables or wind power, that's really good for the environment. Much better way to get your electricity. So that's one of my favorites, I have to say. Now, the next one that I wanted to talk about was traveling. So we can go in a car, we can go in an aeroplane. I was going to show this one as I was digging around in my kids' area, a little play area, but I think it's actually a space rocket. Probably most of us don't go around in a space rocket. But aeroplanes, trains, or we could walk, or we could go on a bike or scoot. Why don't you have a little think about which ones you think might be better for the environment? Well, you probably guessed right. Walking or biking or scooting are definitely the best ones, because you don't need to use any electricity or any petrol or diesel or anything like that to make them go. It's just you making them go. And it's also really good for getting strong and fit as well. And that it's really good for your health. So if you can, it's great to walk to school. That's a really good one. Or just walk whenever you can rather than just jumping in the car, because that's really good for your health if you can, and also good for the planet. The ones that are really good to do less of are things like going in an aeroplane and trying to use your car a bit less, so trying to make sure you do a bit more walking. But if you go in an aeroplane a lot, that creates lots of carbon emissions, and that is not so good for the planet. Now, the next one that I wanted to talk about was what we buy. So as I was showing you earlier, everything that we buy has an impact on the environment, because we have to make it, and it has to be made in factories, and sometimes it's made from things that we have to dig out of the ground, or there are all sorts of different ways to make lots of different things, but sometimes they have to come from the other side of the world. So the best thing is, before you buy something, ask yourself, do I really need it? Or do I already have something in my cupboard that I could use instead? Or ask one of your brothers or sisters if you've got any, or your parents, or whoever you live with, if they've got any ideas, rather than necessarily buying something new. And it's also a really good way to save your pocket money if you're lucky enough to get pocket money. The other thing as well that is worth thinking about is not wasting things. So this could be food. It's really, really good if we don't waste food, because each time we throw food out that we don't eat, it means that that food's been created for nothing, really. So if we can avoid throwing out food, then that's really good for the environment. And also trying not to buy too many clothes as well is another really good one, because we buy lots and lots and lots of clothes in this country, and sometimes we don't always need them all. Sometimes we can share them without, swap with friends, or swap with like someone who's got an older brother and sister or something like that can be really good, because each time we buy new clothes, it takes a lot of water to make clothes, and it also takes sometimes lots of chemicals as well are used to make clothes, which aren't very good for the environment as well. So that's one to think about as well. Another thing, and I'm making this into a very long list, so we might stop in a minute and just have a think about which ones you think you'd like to try, is that we can do lots to protect nature, which is really good. So we could plant plants that bees like, for example. Some of you might have done projects on insects and bees at school, and bees are really important because we need them to pollinate and help other plants grow. We can plant trees if we live in the countryside. That can be a really wonderful thing to do, and planting trees is really great for the environment. Or something else that you could do, which could be really, really make a difference, is to write to your local council and ask them to plant trees, or your MP, the member of parliament who might be interested in helping some of your ideas, because I think it's really important to, if you want to tell people who can make a difference as well, why you think it's so important. So maybe you could write with some of your classmates and encourage your MP or your local council to make changes that are better for the environment in your local area. That can be really good, because I think sometimes we can feel that our voice doesn't make much difference, but actually it really can. And there are lots and lots of times that school children at primary school have really encouraged either companies or politicians to change, and that one's a really important one. So I also wanted to show you now, I'm going to share with you a video from a lady who we work with. She works at the United Nations, which is an organization which is responsible for trying to make the world a better place in lots and lots and lots of different ways. So this lady is called Shayo, and she has a message just for you, which I'm going to play now.
So you probably know that the climate is changing and that it's going to impact the way we live. But what you might not know is that all over the world, people and communities are coming together to take action. Because we can do something about climate change if we work together and if we play our part. So I'm part of a campaign called the Race to Zero, which is working with people and organizations to really change the way we move, the way we eat, the way we power our homes, so that we can do all of those things in a way that is healthier for us and healthier for the planet. And you can be a big part of that. And Giki Zero can help you figure out how. Whether it's walking and cycling more or switching to a more plant-based diet, there is a step for everyone. So you should join me and thousands of others who are figuring out what step is right for them so that you can figure out what step is right for you. And then once you do that, you should tell your brothers and sisters, your mums and dads, your teachers and your schools so that they can do the same. Because together we can make a real difference.
Well, I'm just going to stop sharing that one. Yeah, so that Shio is great, and what she says is so true, that what we do together really makes a difference. And just by talking to your friends or your brothers and sisters, as she said, that can really make a difference, just to help people understand why it's so important and how they can make a difference. So I now just wanted to share a few more pictures with you, which I'm going to just get coming up in a second. There we go. And I wanted to share this little image with you as well, which is one of our favourite cartoons. We made some little cartoons to help everyone remember what we need to do. And sharing your knowledge and what you know about climate change is really important. And also thinking about it as, you know, we do things gradually. We don't have to change everything immediately, but if we can make lots of small changes and keep making those changes, then that can be really effective. So I just wanted to share with you now how we hope that Giki Zero can help you do that. So you can just, it's a website, or you can use it on a phone as well, but you can use it on any, you know, phone, laptop, website. I'll share the web address as well. But what it helps you to do is understand what your carbon footprint is, and then find ways to reduce it. So first of all, you can go in and fill in. You can do this with anyone you live with as well. So you can do it as a household with your brothers or sisters, or just on your own, whichever you prefer. And you can go in and answer as many questions or as few questions as you like about, you know, what you like to eat, what kind of diet you have, how you get around, whether you walk a lot or whether you go in the car, information about your home, which you might need to do with your mummy and daddy, or who you live with. And then that gives you some information about what your carbon footprint looks like. And then once you know what your carbon footprint looks like, that's when you actually can start thinking, okay, well, what differences can I make to it? And if you go onto the steps page, that's where you can find lots and lots of different things that you can do. There are over 120 different steps in there, and you can filter them and sort them on how easy or difficult they are, and on what impact they might have on the planet. And that way you can find the right ones for you and the right ones for whoever you live with. And, you know, there are things like changing your electricity to wind electricity or renewable electricity that we were talking about earlier, and lots of other ones. Some of them are really easy, some of them are a bit trickier, but you can find the ones that are right for you. And here's an example of one. So this is just trying a different kind of milk, trying plant-based milk instead of cow's milk, which some of you might have tried. Some of, you know, goat's milk, or there are all sorts of different milks now that you can get in the supermarket. So some of them are better for the environment than others. And then there are lots of different steps that you can take a look at. But the most important thing is it can be quite fun, and each time you do one, you win a little badge on your Giki Zero account. So that was a message I just wanted to share earlier. But I think the main thing is really just to think about the fact that all of us we're all part of this planet, and we all have a really important role to play in protecting it. And however young you are or however old you are, you can use your actions and your voice to really make a difference, and to share what you think is important with other people. And as Shio said, together we really can do what we need to do to protect this wonderful world we live in, and to enjoy it as well, because there's so much in nature that we can enjoy, that we should make the most of it, and do all that we can to protect it. So that I think covers everything that I wanted to talk about in terms of what we can do. I think the one thing that I wanted to explain as well was this idea of getting to to net zero, which it sounds complicated, but basically it just means making sure that we stop emitting carbon emissions, and that any emissions that we do emit are balanced out. So if we're emitting this many carbon emissions, we need to make sure that we reabsorb the same amount by planting trees, for example. But effectively, the most important thing in the long term, probably, you know, in 30 or 40 years time, when you're all grown up, like properly grown up, and you've been adults for some time, is that we hopefully will get to zero carbon emissions, and we'll find a way to live that doesn't require us to create carbon emissions to have, you know, have the life that we need to have. And I just wanted to end with my the three things that around the sessions, that all of the sessions are doing this, which I think is a really great idea in terms of a wonderful vision for the future. And I think it would just be so amazing if we could live in a world where everybody cares for nature, and that we can live without producing carbon emissions, because that would be good for us, good for nature, good for animals, good for the planet. And if you want to take action after this session, why not join us with Shio and thousands of people around the earth on the race to zero. It would be brilliant if you wanted to do that. You can sign up in Giki Zero, and then we'll help you get there. It'll take time, but we can all get there in the end. And I think it would be amazing if the world leaders at COP26 and beyond could lead us to a zero carbon and a fairer world, because I think that would be better for everybody. So on that note, thank you so much for joining, and I hope that was helpful. And if you do want to have a go on Giki Zero, you just put Giki Zero in your search engine and it'll come up, and have fun and do it with your teachers, or with your parents, or whoever you live with, or your brothers and sisters. And hopefully it will teach you, and you'll find it helpful to think about all the different things that we can help to protect the planet. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.